good byproducts. If you don't have the insulin to allow that glucose to enter that cell wall, and your body starts to break down fats and muscle, you then have anaerobic. Now I know we think of aerobic and anaerobic as being purely oxygen, but you need, for aerobic metabolism, you need oxygen and glucose. Alright, so you're getting plenty of oxygen, you're just not getting the glucose part of it. So with anaerobic metabolism, it's either 2 or 4 ATPs. We'll call it 4. I've read different things in different places, but anyways. So 4 ATPs. You get very little energy, and the byproducts of this is lactic acid. Okay. So lactic acid, hydrogen ions, lactic acid, have a pH of 3. pH, oh crap, we got to go into that for a minute. Our body, we look at pH scale, we have 1, we got 14. In the middle here we have 7.0, okay? That is pure neutral. Our body doesn't like that. Our body likes 7.35 to 7.45. It's a very narrow window, and that's where our body thrives. Our cells, our cell walls, our organelles, and then they make up, of course, tissues, which make up organs, which make up organ systems, which make us up. So, gives off hydrogen ions. So instead of being up here at 7.35, our body's pH starts to slip left and we start to become acidic. One of the other byproducts of anaerobic metabolism is we give off ketones. Oh, didn't I say ketones up here? Ketones, which you can measure in urine also, ketones give that fruity odor to the breath. Okay. So, if we have glucose, it may be resistant and we don't have enough insulin, we don't have enough glucose entering the cell to keep our glucose low, but our cells are still getting glucose and they still have the oxygen. So in type 2, we remain aerobic. If we remain aerobic, we continue with heat, CO2, water, and we stay 7.35 to 7.45. We do not become acidotic. So, because of anaerobic metabolism, we give off ketones as a waste product. We can smell ketones on people's breath. Ugh, not all of us though. There is I read one place it's as high as 40% of humans cannot smell ketones or alcohol on somebody's breath. You know, that it's been metabolized and it's been given off through the respiratory system. I am one of those people. I have a very hard time smelling alcohol on people's breath. It's got to be a lot. They've had to have drank a lot, and it's got to be right in my face for me to smell it. I have trouble with that fruity odor also. So I have to look at the other things to figure this out. And this is the one right here. Because as their pH starts to drop, as they become more and more and more acidic, right? Because they're releasing a bunch of hydrogen ions, their buffer system kicks in. Now the kidneys release bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is HCO3, and that helps offset that. We'll cover that in a second. But the buffer system also works with the respiratory system. So, with this, so if you have the release, I gotta make a little more space here. So if you have hydrogen ions in the bloodstream, okay, and your kidneys are releasing bicarbonate, so plus HCO3, that's going to give you H2CO3, which is carbonic acid. Hydrogen is a 3, carbonic acid is roughly a 5. Now what your buffer system can do with this, by breathing rapid and deep cosmols, is it will break down H2CO3 into H2O plus CO2. So I've got 2 hydrogens here, I've got 2 hydrogens there. I've got 1 carbon there, I've got 1 carbon there. I've got 3 oxygens here, I've got 1, 2, 3 there. So by breathing fast, I can break those down and I can exhale oxygen, water, and carbon dioxide and start to bring my pH back to normal. So, in an aerobic patient, in an anaerobic acidotic shock patient, let's say, if you stop the process that is making them anaerobic, it could be a patient who's hypoxic and they become anaerobic. If you stop that process by ventilating them, okay, that patient's in cardiac arrest. This is an even better example. They're in cardiac arrest. Their heart's not beating, they're not breathing, there's no blood circulating, there's no oxygen circulating, there's no perfusion of oxygen, glucose, and there's no perfusion out of waste product. Right? Boom, they become anaerobic and they become acidotic. You stop that by starting doing chest compressions and ventilating them. You will bring this back up if you catch them early enough, mind you, and you will put that pH back into a more safe environment, the body into a more safe environment with a more stable pH. The problem with type 1 diabetic who is in diabetic ketoacidosis, is you're in the field, you're at their house with them, you're wherever, and they still don't have that insulin, they still are not getting glucose into their cells. As much as the kidneys release bicarb, as much as they hyperventilate to break down carbonic acid, they're not catching up. They're still falling behind the curve. Okay? So that is how I look at them and go, oh, they're type 1 diabetic. They may not be making sense. They may not be able to tell me. They may be alone. They could be at a ball game. There may be nobody there that knows them. Okay? But I know it's DKA. Now, if you have a type 1 diabetic who's in DKA, I watch people who don't get this tell them, oh, they're hyperventilating. You got to get your breathing under control. You got to slow your breathing down. You're hyperventilating. You're going to make yourself dizzy. No. F you. Screw you. Don't do that to them. This is the only way their body can compensate right now. If you try to talk them down and you're just going to get in an argument with them. Or you actually talk them through okay, ready, take a breath. Hold it, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, let it out. Take a breath in, 1,000, they're going to become more acidotic and they're going to die. They're going to crash in front of you, okay? Here's the other problem with that. If they are unresponsive, or you're a medic and you've RSI'd them, and you've got a tube in them, or you're bagging them, they're on a vent, whatever it is, you need to match what they were doing before. Remember, they weren't keeping up. Let's say their Kussmaul respirations were 40 a minute. Oh my God, 40 a minute, that's awful, that's wrong. No, they were still becoming acidotic, right? 40 a minute and their pH is still dropping. You start bagging them at 12 a minute, because we're supposed to bag them at 10 to 12 a minute. You'll kill them. Their heart will stop. They'll become acidotic exponentially faster than they were, and they'll go into VFib. And guess what? An acidotic VFib heart is not going to convert, in period. Okay? So, you're a medic and you RSI them and you put them on a vent, and they were breathing 40 times a minute, you set the vent at 44. Okay? I don't care about oxygen. You can leave the FiO2 at room air. That's not what they need. They need that conversion, and they need the exhalation of gases to make that occur. All right? And that was beat into me by this Dartmouth flight medic that I did a CCP course with. I hadn't even really thought about it. I'd been a medic, 25, 28 years at the time I took this class, and I was like, holy cow, why didn't I think of that before? Okay? So, keep their respiratory rate up. Keep it going. Now, we look at our type 2. Well, first off, before we move on to that, type 1s, what's the definition of DKA? Well, we've got ketones and we've got acidosis. But what's our blood sugar? Because everybody, oh, well, it's only 200, you can't be in DKA. Actually, you can. What's this, 2020? We're working on, in New Hampshire, we're working on 2020 protocols. I think it was in the 2016 or 18 protocols. They defined blood sugar over 200 as being at risk for DKA. I've actually seen patients recently with sugars under 200 that were in DKA. Okay? We sent their urine, it was full of glucose. We sent their, in their urine, it was full of ketones. And we did blood gas, and their pH was 7.20. All right, that's DKA. Now, our type 2s. Type 1. So, 180, 200, you start to see those numbers, you got to think about DKA. Our type 2 diabetics become hyperglycemic also. They have all those same symptoms. They have the hyperosmolar dehydration. In fact, their crises, HHS, hyperglycemic, hyperosmolar syndrome, or sickness. I've seen both. Okay? Now, hyperglycemic, that stands to reason they have high blood sugars. Hyperosmolar means they're shifting water, trying to cover this and trying to dilute it. They are hyperosmolar dehydration. Dehydrated, okay? They have glucose in their cells. They remain in aerobic metabolism. Their pH, so they give off CO2, water, heat, right? Their pH stays the same. They do not have that buffer system response. They do not have Kussmaul respirations. They are burning glucose to make normal amounts of energy and normal waste products. They are not burning fat and muscle. They do not give off ketones. Okay? Now, here's the problem. So, you look at them, and the respiratory rate's the same. The respiratory rate's normal, and they're super sick, but they're normal respirations. It's probably type 2. HHS, I've seen numbers as high as 20% mortality rate with this. And their blood sugars tend to be a lot higher. I mean, you can have a DKA patient at 700 or 800, But these HHS patients, you tend to see them at 1,000, 1,200, 1,400. Okay? Now, excuse me, we're not going to know that in the field, right? In the ERs, either, when we do a glucose, a finger stick, we're not going to get that because most of our glucometers at 500 read high. Okay? But their glucose is going to come back from the lab, 7, 8, 9, 100, 1,000. All right. So that's how you can tell the difference in these folks. Now, our hypoglycemia. We have, they can still be hungry. I mean, people get hungry, right? But they get hungry because now their cells don't have the glucose either, because they've used it up. Now, your type 2s, for the most part, aren't going to get hypoglycemic, right? Why do you get hypoglycemic? You get hypoglycemic because you took your insulin and didn't eat enough. Or you didn't take your insulin, and therefore it doesn't matter how much you eat, you're not going to get glucose. All right? So those are the two main causes. So your blood sugar starts to drop. And your body will tell you you're hungry because you need glucose. You also get tired. Right? Tired, fatigue. You get pale, cool, and diaphoretic. And when I say diaphoretic, I'm talking soak through a hoodie sweatshirt, okay? Just soaking wet water running off them. Then you start to see your altered mental status, angry, cranky, and then unresponsive. Now, your type 2 HHS patients, a lot of times as their sugar gets up in that 1,000 range, they do go unresponsive. Your hypoglycemic type 1 and your hyperglycemic type 1 and your hyperglycemic type 2 are going to look the same. The difference is this happens fast, minutes to an hour. Hyperglycemia with these symptoms takes days. Okay? So, history. Ma'am, when did your husband start to act this way? Oh, 10 minutes before I called. All right, he's hypoglycemic. Well, he started feeling kind of poorly yesterday. Okay, hyperglycemic. Do a finger stick, right? This dude is hypoglycemic, right? I mean, he's going to have a glucose less than 80-ish, 70 to 80. All right? I've had a couple instances where I dropped my blood sugar because of some abdominal surgery I had, my gastric bypass. And I had what's called dumping syndrome. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But I've dropped my blood sugar and been conscious at 35. And I can tell you I felt like shit. I thought I was going to die. I knew what was going on. I could still process that. I knew what happened. I knew why it happened. And I knew it's only going to take 10 or 15 minutes for my body to catch up and bring my blood sugar back up. But I thought I was going to die. And I got angry. I was cooking a steak on the grill. And I started feeling bad. And I came in, did a finger stick. You know, my wife's diabetic. Did a finger stick, 35. And then I remembered, I get steak on the grill. I went out and it was burning. And I had this big spatula. And I slammed it down and broke the grate in the grill. And realize that I get angry when my blood sugar gets low, right? I mean, it's like the commercial, have a Snickers. So I just sat down, waited it out, and my blood sugar came back up. So you see that with hypoglycemia a lot. I guess now is a good time to talk about high and lows and normal. So in your non-diabetic patient or your type 2 diabetic, your body makes insulin in the pancreas. This carbohydrate comes down your esophagus, into your stomach, and out into your small intestine. And in the duodenum, it starts to absorb the small glucoses. It doesn't absorb the larger ones until a little further down the road, though. So you get this small amount of glucose starting to be absorbed, and your body goes, oh, glucose, I need to release insulin. And your body releases insulin. Well, it's not an exact science in your brain. Your brain doesn't go, oh, well, it doesn't wait to absorb all the glucose and go, well, I just absorbed 42 glucoses, I need to give this much in. It just starts to dump insulin. And so your sugar's starting to climb, and then your sugar will start to go down, and your body goes, oh crap, it's going to start to drop. I better release some glucose to the system. And the way it does that is it releases glycogen into the system, and that converts to glucose and brings your blood sugar back up. And so all day long, your body does this with insulin, insulin, glycogen, insulin, glycogen, insulin, glycogen. Okay? Now, these folks can release glycogen, but if they haven't taken in more glucose, that glycogen may have kept them in this area for a little bit, but once that glycogen wears off and there's no more glycogen, boom, unresponsive, okay? Now, how do we treat these things? Hyperglycemia, we treat with fluid. We want to dilute the glucose that's in the bloodstream. So you're an EMT in the state of New Hampshire anyways, if they're not nauseous and puking, you can give them water, and they can drink as much water as they want on the way to the hospital. You give them a liter bottle of sterile water out of the cabinet. You're at their house, hey, you got a gallon jug? Fill it, let's take it with us. You are a EMT or a medic, then you put a line in them, and not a 22 or a 24, right? You throw an 18 in them, and you start to pour fluid into them. With this hyperosmolar dehydration, sometimes these folks will need between 8 and 10 liters of saline just to fix the dehydration part of it. So if you're going to run a couple of liters in, you've got a long enough ride, you can run a couple of liters in and do it. Throw a second line in, hang a second bag, okay, and give them fluids. Excuse me. Now, we're not, obviously in the field, we're not giving them insulin, but even in the ER, under crises of DKA or HHN, we don't immediately give glucose. We want glucose to climb slowly and to drop slowly, okay? If we just pounded a bunch of insulin into them, yeah, we drop their blood sugar, but we throw their body into just absolute turmoil. So even in the ER, we're going to give them several liters of fluid first, and we're going to recheck their blood sugar. And we want to see a percentage of drop in their glucose before they start to go, okay, well, now we'll give them 10 of insulin. Okay, now, okay, we're going to continue with this much fluid over this many hours. Now we can do an insulin drip. Okay, we want the sugars to come down slowly. Which leads me to treatment for hypoglycemia. We want their sugars to climb slowly also. If they are awake and they can manage their airway, they don't need an IV. Give them something to eat or drink. Now let's talk about old school hypoglycemic therapy, shall we? One of the medics in one of my refreshers made this comment to that diabetic educator, and I swear to God I thought she was going to cry. She said, how do you guys treat, hypoglycemia in the field? He said, well, if they can drink, then we take a big cup of orange juice, and he held his hand up like this, like 32-ounce orange juice. So let's 32-ounce orange juice. And then we put a couple of tablespoons of sugar into it, and we mix it up and have them drink it. And she said, how many is a couple? And he goes, I don't know, 3 or 4, whatever. So let's say 4 tablespoons of sugar. And then we have them drink it. And we have them drink it as fast as they can because, while their sugar's low, they're losing brain cells. I thought she was going to cry. And this is why. 4 ounces of orange juice, 4 ounces of milk, 4 ounces of regular soda, not diet soda, but regular soda, have 15 carbohydrates. Okay. So 32 divided by 4 is 8. So 15 times 8, that's 40, that's 8, that's 120 carbohydrates. So now we've added 4 tablespoons of sugar. There are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So that is equal to 12 teaspoons. 1 teaspoon of sugar has 15 carbohydrates in it. 12 times 15, that's 10, that's 3, that's 5, that's 180 carbohydrates. On top of that 120, and we're looking at 300 carbs. Again, let me reinforce the fact that I thought she was going to cry. And she said, "Why do you do this?" Well, because it's what we were taught. She said, "Who taught it to you?" "I don't know, one of my partners when I was younger." "Why?" "Well, because their brain cells are dying and we have to get their blood sugars up." So let's look at their blood sugars. Let's put this 300 over here for a minute. So, 100, 200. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, etc. When your blood sugar drops, so let's say, well, first off, let's talk about how they control blood sugars and how they want them controlled. So they will look at this fasting glucose and the A1Cs of your type 1 diabetics and say, all right, your resting metabolic rate is this, and let's say it's 140